back in 5 minutes and we begin. Igen. 5 percig kezdünk, jó? Úgyhogy jönnek az emberek.
Alright, nice. Doing what? Fighting inside. Like what? Oh. No, please. Not for the effort, I mean. But she's blonde, beautiful.
They're all hitting on her.
They forgive her everything. Everything. They're arguing about the.
Yeah.
And therefore we can drink wine now.
Yeah.
Yeah, very nice.
We have some of them.
No.
All right. Yeah.
Very funny and quarreling all the time. Always fighting, I mean, but they don't put the police on the spot.
Hopefully everyone. A couple of years back, the race dilemma why did they all fight each other? Like, well, next week we're all going to go to Germany. What was the point there? Why did we do? Why did we kill each other?
And that's
It's a nice place. No.
But that's the only thing. Here,
Is it Metallic said or the Orient means that the Landstraße, something like that, right? So for it's all Cisleiter is all, or is it Transleiter? It's Transleiter. Transleiter is all Slavs.
and we get hurt. The politician, the speech, we go to USA. Won't see anyone.
Yes. Yeah, perfect. Yeah. Everyone.
Vanya Luka or Sarajevo, perhaps, but not Osi.
Everyone wants to push the button. Bravo Zizek has this funny video. Have you seen it? Right now, we are in the middle of Ljubljana on the bridge. On this side, Central Middle Europa, civilization. But they don't like it. On this side, balcon, backwards, stretching.
Oh my god.
Everyone pushes it. Like, if you ask the Bulgarians, they'll say it's like it's in Turkey, and we don't care. Like, we don't care. But, up to the Bulgarians, everyone will say it's further on. It's the one I referred to. Like all the guys that like to watch it. Tell me.
No.
Oh, all right. Yeah.
And they blame me.
Yeah. And he was Slovene.
He's
Slav.
founding father of the Slovenian state. They're Slovenian, but they
Yeah.
how dare it? How did you dare it? I mean, I'm gonna keep talking about that. I mean, I'm here. I saw the film, but there's nothing about that. I mean, you okay?
You want to say hi, or you enjoy your steak?
Kérlek, valami éva buvarról van nyilván.
Fuvarról. Intézzük ezután, jó? Van egy feladat egyszerre, jó? Sziasztok, jó reggelt kívánok, köszöntöm a kedves közönséget. Mohács 500 kapcsán kezdődik 2 percen belül egy török-magyar történészvita. Rendkívül izgalmas programnak ígérkezik. Igen, össze fogjuk szedni a panelistákat, és akkor rövid 2 percen belül kezdünk is. A vita angol nyelven fog zajlani, úgyhogy 2 perc múlva kezdünk. Köszi szépen addig.
You have another table? Is this for the spirit of King Lajos when he returns, or like what's the extra seat for?
Jól van, jól van. Is it Csashkuru?
Chashkuru, yeah. Pretty good, pretty good. Yeah. Even Turks find it difficult. Thankfully you guys have all the
Not for me.
the vowels and you have the consonants.
Luis is taking swimming courses. The next okay for the revenge.
Ahmed épp megkérdezte, hogy a hiányzó mikrofon az vajon második Lajos szellemének van-e fenntartva, aki ugye a mohácsi csatában elesett. Köszöntök mindenkit, jó reggelt kívánok. Ugye Mohács 500 kapcsán rengeteg sok beszélgetés és különböző, nem tudom, videós tartalmak, online tartalmak, kiállítások, mint például itt tőlünk is balra látható egy panelkiállítás zajlik, és hát azon gondolkoztunk, hogy hogyan tudnánk ezt a kérdést egy kicsit új perspektívában megvilágítani, és egy kicsit talán még izgalmasabbá tenni, és hát ennek kapcsán jutottunk arra a konklúzióra, hogy mi lenne, hogyha a török akadémiai szféra és a magyar akadémiai szférának egy képviselője, vagy őket ültetnénk le, és megpróbálnánk adni egy rálátást arra, hogy a két különböző történettudományi ágazat hogyan látja ezt a kérdést, és hát talán ebből, ha egy vita is kikerekedik, akkor még annál is izgalmasabb a dolog. Úgyhogy a vita angolul fog zajlani, a beszélgetés angolul fog zajlani, úgyhogy most próbálok fejben átállni erre, mindjárt át is váltok. De ugye ez nyilván azért van, mert ugye ez az a közös nyelv, amit mindannyian bírunk. Tolmácsolás ezúttal nincs, de hát igyekszünk a szókincset nem túlságosan is túlbonyolítani. On the 29th of August in 1526, the Kingdom of Hungary suffered a defeat at the field of Mohács, whose consequences would shape Central Europe for centuries to come. Before the Battle of Mohács, Hungary used to be a significant regional power. However, after the battle, it became a frontier zone contested by 2 rivaling empires, the Ottomans on the one hand and the Habsburgs on the other hand. Much of the kingdom came under Ottoman rule, while even the political center, the very capital of the country, moved outside of the kingdom to Vienna. And you know, I think the significance of Mohács lies in the fact that for more than a century, repeated campaigns, raids, sieges, and population movements exhausted the country's resources and limited the country's capacity for recovery and development. And it's a very well-known fact, but that by the 18th century, Hungarians, as an ethnic, like the Magyars, no longer formed the absolute majority within the lands of the Kingdom of Hungary. And you know, these demographic changes, which are the direct results of the Battle of Mohács and the Turkish and the Ottoman invasion, would later become part of the historical background of the dissolution of the historic state of Hungary and the Treaty of Trianon. And it's not surprising that in Hungarian memory, Mohács became a symbol for national catastrophe, right? So nemzeti nagylétünk nagy temetője, the great grave ride of our national greatness. And the word itself entered the language entered the vocabulary as an analogy for later disasters. One might recall the annihilation of the Second Hungarian Army at the Don River during the invasion of the Soviet Union. My own great-grandfather perished in one of these battles, and that has often been described as the second Mohács, right? So it's a really a national consciousness forming event. And as I said that during the introduction, we are basically a month away from the 500th anniversary of the battle. And Mohács is again subjected to various exhibitions, conferences, public debate. Really, there's no shortage of these programs. And there's an exhibition just to our left, so you are very welcome. I strongly encourage you to visit. And today we brought together a Turkish and a Hungarian historian to examine the same event from two different accounts, two different historical perspectives. I believe that the very basic facts are not really up to debate. We know what exactly happened and on that fateful day.
With the expanding realm of Islam. Right after their emergence, the emergence of the Turks, a century afterwards, Islam emerges and the Arabs keep expanding in all directions. And around the 8th century, they hit the parts of the inner Asian steppes where the Turks live. And this triggers a process of more migration of Turks towards West, but also Islamization. So by the time you reach the 10th century, 11th century, you have the Turks mostly Islamized. They're Muslim at this point, and they're still pushing in all directions, but mostly towards West in the search of more pasture. They first come in contact with the Persians, at that point Muslim Persians, and they set up the first big empire called the Seljuk Empire. So the Ottomans, they're a tiny group themselves, but they basically come out of this already 200-year-old Turkish empire that has immersed that has absorbed the Persian element as well. And the Persians, as you know, they have had a state for millennia at that point. They knew statecraft. They also kind of gave a big advantage to Arabs in terms of developing their own state. So they do the same again, this time for another group of people, this time not for Arabs, but for Turks. And the Seljuks, they're the ones who conquer what is today known as the country of Turkey, right? Anatolia, They had a sincere religious motivation. They were devout Muslims, and they saw it as a duty to expand the domain of Islam and to bring what they saw as the justice of Islam, the goodness of Islam to different peoples everywhere. And this was also lucrative in terms of material things, right? Because once you take a Muslim land, you can't really take them as slaves, you can't really loot their property, you can't really do much. But if you take it from non-Muslims, by force, obviously, if you take it by diplomacy, you can't do any of that. But if you have taken it by the force of your arms, per the customs of war at the time, you can make a good profit. So they both had the religious motivation and the worldly motivation, which I don't see in conflict. You know, human beings, we have a lot of motivations going on in our hearts and minds all the time. So they kept pressing on westwards for this reason. And they already, as I said, already in the Anatolian side, they had practiced their skills of incorporating local elites, and they perfected that with the Greeks and the Slavs south of Danube. And by the time they reached Hungary for that reason, they had in their armies people who had just converted to Islam, but they also had Christians, like Albanian Christians or Serbian Christians, who were now doing their own bidding, and they were collecting taxes for the Ottomans, they were raising troops for the Ottomans, so they had really had a very developed imperial bureaucratic machinery at that point. They had a very sophisticated justice system, they had a very sophisticated taxation system, which Tamás shows in his book as more efficient by the time we reached the Battle of Mohács than the Hungarian counterpart, right? So that constant expansion was a necessity, but they also realized that it was what made them strong, right? Like that constant fighting really honed their skills and made them a better administrator and better warrior in a way.
Thank you. I'd like to bring in Tamás to the discussion. What place did Hungary occupy in the Ottoman understanding of Europe before the Battle of Mohács? There was some, if you think of János Hunyadi, I think he was the one who led the last effort to kind of trying to roll back the Ottoman expansion, right, and retake Constantinople, which the Turks famously conquered back in 1453. A sad day in our Christian history, for sure. So, what were the objectives? So, what were they trying to achieve? What strategy did they employ when it came to Hungary? Did they see it as a kingdom that might be defeated and subordinated, or they wanted to create a vassal kingdom out of it? Just what were some of the images that they have of Hungary?
Yeah, very easy question to answer. First, I would like to reflect on Ahmed's proposal because there is an ongoing debate about the motivations of the Ottoman Empire, especially in Western European history writing. What did the Ottoman Empire live for? Plunder, kind of jihad, holy war against the Christian enemies in Europe. When I wrote my book, there was an eminent Ottomanist living in Germany, nomina sunt odiosa, I won't give the name, but she, at least indicate the gender, she told me that my perspective is wrong because view from a longer perspective, the whole problem has no sense because we can approach the whole thing as a long cultural accommodation between Islam and Christianity, the Muslim Empire, Ottoman Empire, and Hungary, which is, I think it's a misinterpretation because what is important from our point of view is the perception of contemporaries. And we can speak about Hunyadi because for contemporary Hungarians, what the Ottoman Empire meant was a constant menace, an existential menace that is a war for all or nothing in a sense. They did express it in that way. Hunyadi himself wrote that either we die or the Ottomans disappear from Europe altogether, if possible. So it was the Hungarian perception. And there is, I think, one very important point to be stressed is that Hungary, the Kingdom of Hungary, was the very first polity kingdom country in Europe that was Latin Christian and not Orthodox. And this difference has to be stressed because whereas for the Orthodox polities in the Balkans, the Bosnians, Bulgarians, the Serbs, even the Byzantines, there was an option of being integrated into the Ottoman polity while keeping their Orthodox faith, but still be integrated in the Ottoman political structures. because for them it was a better option in several cases. George Brankovic is one case in point. Giovanni Capistrano, the Franciscan preacher, wanted to convert to Catholicism even in 1455. He told the old despot that he will not get money from Europe, from Hungary, unless he converts to Catholicism, to which he responded that, no way, my friend. But for the Balkan states, it remained an option to be integrated by keeping the faith. In Hungary, the first Latin Christian community in Europe, it was not an option. And they did express it several times. And for Hungary, either, of course, converting to Islam, no way, but not paying tribute to the Ottomans and not letting troops through Hungarian land, because that means instantly exclusion from Latin Europe. So it's no political option, and that explains why, from the very first moment, in Hungary, the Ottoman Turks were treated as the arch enemies, inimicus capitalis in Hungarian documents, charters. You read it several times. Hungary had several enemies, but they never called inimicus capitalis arch enemy. Never called the Bohemians, the Czechs, the Austrians, the Habsburgs. No one is called, only the Ottoman Turks. And that indicates it was a different kind of fight. For the Hungarians, it was a fight for survival. And that explains what Hunyadi tried in the middle of the 15th century. In fact, he was the only one who tried this kind of offensive strategy. Why he did so is a moot point. We don't really see his motivations, his strategic conception. Why his fights and lost battles are very, very important for our point of view and for the Ottomans as well, because they indicated in 1444 in Varna and then 4 years later in Kosovo Polje, which is now Kosovo, but at that time was in Serbia, that this kind of offensive warfare was too much of a fight for Hungarian resources. That was the very point when the Hungarian political community, and not only the rulers, but the whole community, realized that this kind of suicidal, I would say, suicidal warfare against the Ottomans it was already at that time a futile attempt. And why this is important? It's important because for the next almost 100 years, until the Battle of Mohács, 80 years in fact, it remained a principle of Hungarian strategic thinking that no overt war, no open battle with the Sultan's forces is a viable option.
The Hungary which was encountered by the Ottomans was greatly weakened since the days of Matthias Corvinus, right? I think that's a claim that can be reasonably made. So the question is, what had happened to the military, financial, and political capacity of the kingdom between Matthias's death in 1490 and Suleiman invasions in 1526? Was the problem of, are we talking about a problem of lack of resources or the inability to mobilize those resources, to channel those resources? One contemporary explanation often pointed to the problem of national disunity, which was later picked up on by, during the formative time of the modern Hungarian national consciousness in the 19th century. They often pointed to the lack of national unity, which also has some merit because one only has to think about János Szapolyai, who famously failed to show up in the battlefield and bring his bannermen to the battle, potentially because he might have been, eager to put himself forward as a potential candidate to take over the kingdom as a king. But perhaps this is some kind of later moral imposition, right? Because if you think of the contemporary European kingdoms, there it was daily business of politics, this kind of competition between elites, between the aristocrats, and where they were playing their own Game of Thrones. One only has to think of the War of Roses in England between the Yorks and the Lancasters. Thank you very much. Was it national disunity? Was it ineffective government? Exceptional breakdown of government? What's going on in Hungary at this time?
Again, a very easy question. When we think about Hungary, Hungarian history, national unity is not the term that comes first to mind. Just think about the present. I mean, no, perhaps under the Arpads, we know nothing. There was unity, but since then, no unity ever. But nowhere in Europe, not even in the Ottoman Empire. I mean, these are quite normal things. What changes after the death of Matthias Corvinus, who was a great king, of course, the one whom Mehmed II himself deemed equal to himself, if we can believe János Turóczy. It's a relative weakening. You started with weakening. It's not Hungary that's becoming weaker, but the empire, Ottoman Empire, that's becoming stronger all the time. So it's a relative weakening. Just keep in mind that when King Matthias took the Hungarian throne in 1458, there was still the remnant of the Serbian state, medieval Serbian state. There was still a Bosnian kingdom to the south of the Hungarian borders. There was still a kind of Albanian rebellion, whatever, tribal organization, but still fighting against the Ottomans. There are at least 3 political communities that's fighting the Ottomans alongside Hungary. When King Matthias dies in 1490, the entire Balkans, save for Croatia, which is, I'm not sure whether it can be counted as the Balkans, but it doesn't matter here. But from Bosnia, from the Croatian border down to Albania and Bulgaria, it's all Ottoman land, integrated into the empire. And according to the newest research, it was not only Egypt and Syria that brought him huge taxation yields for the Ottomans, also the Balkan territories. So when Vladislav II took the Hungarian throne, he had to face a new Ottoman Empire along a much longer border than King Matthias ever had to. We can debate, and there is a long debate and never-ending debate about what Matthias wanted to do with fighting against his kind of like Selim against the Muslim enemies in Asia. Safavids. Matthias is doing the same against his Christian rivals. George Podjebrad, the king of Bohemia, his former father-in-law, he was a Hussite heretic, and he's fighting against him with the excuse, we don't know, that after beating his former father-in-law, he will turn against the Ottomans. It's a point that can never be justified or proved. Of course, we can believe him or not. It's a matter of individual decision. But nevertheless, when King Vladislav II, who was a very, very bad press in Hungarian historiography, interestingly also in the Czech one, although he was a fairly successful king of Bohemia for 19 years before taking the Hungarian throne, he bought off King Matthias, the Hungarian king, for almost 2 decades. And nevertheless, he has a very, very low reputation even in Bohemia. But he was not a bad king. At least he was not stupid. But the challenges that he had to face against the Ottomans were in a different range of order than had been the case in the time of Matthias Corvinus. And King Vladislav II and the Hungarian political elite was very, very conscious of this fact. From his accession, we have numerous references to the fear that if we face the Ottomans again in open conflict and we are beaten, it will be all lost. There is just to give you one example, there is a Ottoman-Hungarian and Venetian war in 1501, 1502, and there is a papal legate in Buda, and there are Venetian envoys in Buda, Venetian ambassadors, and they both urged the King of Hungary, Vladislav II, to take the field against the Ottomans in person and attack the Sultan, who is Bayezid II at that time. And the king is told by his own Chancellor Tamás Bakos, the Archbishop of Esztergom, that keep in mind, Your Majesty, that your uncle, Vladislav I, died against the Ottomans in the battlefield of Varna. And if the Ottomans win again a battle like that, the whole kingdom is lost. So that's the importance of Hunyadi's failures in the Balkans, that this remains a basic fact, the basic principle of Hungarian policy, right to Mohács. And it can be debated whether it was a good one, because they miss all the opportunities that may have been favorable. I mean, like this war with Venice against the Ottomans under Bayezid. Bayezid was not as aggressive as either Mehmed II or Selim, his son. But even in the time of Bayezid, the Hungarians did not anymore dare to attack the Ottomans. Not because they knew they were weaker, but not because they lost any resources. Hungary remained the same. The taxes were paid as they had been paid in the time of Matthias or Sigismund of Luxembourg. Very simply, they faced an enemy that was becoming all the time stronger, with every new conquest stronger, and the balance was finally shifted or tilted in favor thanks to the conquest of Selim. And we have both domestic documents and Ottoman foreign reports that reflect the fact that after 1520, the Hungarian court was in, a desperate situation. They knew very, very well that the time was, working against them, and from this point on, decision would be taken by the Ottomans and not by the Hungarian court.
Another popular explanation points to the lack of European help, so the Christian powers didn't come to Hungary's aid in their hour of dire need, and that is because these principal Western powers have been were more preoccupied with one another than creating a common united front against the Ottomans. Again, one has to think of the rivalry between France and the Habsburgs, right? So Charles V, the Holy Roman Empire, had defeated and captured Francis I at Pavia just a year before Mohács, and Francis actually sought the assistance of Suleiman against the Habsburgs. So they were trying to play on these rivalries, and my question is, was Hungary genuinely abandoned, or why was there a lack of assistance? You can only think of the Crusades, right? So you mentioned the Seljuks at the beginning of your talk. When the Seljuks emerged, Europe's or Western Christianity's response was the Crusades, and for centuries they were trying to regain or reconquer the Holy Land, to liberate the Holy Land from a Christian point of view. They were trying to liberate the Holy Land from the infidels' oppression. What became of this idea? Why wasn't there a crusade? Why didn't the Pope, call the banners and launch at least an expeditionary force to help Hungary in their hour of need? Into the microphone, gentlemen, if you may.
I was asking, weren't there crusades though? Nicopolis, Varna, the Savoyard crusade. So I think it was more about European capacity to organize crusades, because they did declare crusades, but it didn't produce the same armies, the same fervor that came with the crusades against the Seljuks and the Ayyubids, right? So maybe that's my 2 cents, but more from the more Central European side on to Tamás.
But I think the idea of crusade did not disappear by the even before a couple of years before Mohács. There is a planned crusade with an all-European participation from Scotland to Portugal. All Europe is to be involved, but it founders on the very fact that they can not agree among themselves. The first point is who will lead the expedition: the King of France, the King of England, the King of Hungary, the Emperor, whoever. So it's a very typical European way of thinking. But it was, in fact, a lottery, a logistical impossibility, in fact. The plans were very well elaborated, very well thought out, but at that time, impossible to implement.
And the Reformation was just.
And the but that was the last. That's right. In the coffin. But otherwise, I think it's not a very new pattern. Then European politics has been working like that since then. Those who, in fact, aided Hungary were the papacy. That has to be admitted, with money and troops. Even before Mohács, it was the papal legate who took money to hire mercenaries. And the Venetian Republic, which is very interesting because it's very typical. I mean, the Venetians did fund the wars of Matthias, also funded the Jagiellonians, but only to a certain point. I mean, it's a maritime republic, merchant republic. They had their own interest, and they were very, very careful not to take too much risk. We help you, but only to the point when our maritime and commercial interests are not threatened. And if the Sultan gives a better deal, we will take it, France. And they always knew it in Hungary. And there is a contemporary source, when the war is launched, they say that be careful with the Venetians, because they will, in fact, help us, but not to the extremes. If we take the field and they abandon us, we will be crushed by the Sultan alone. But otherwise, just imagine to explain to an English peasant or a French peasant that you have to pay your tax and we'll give it to a distant country, you don't even know where it is. You don't even know whether they are Latin Christians or whatever, or pagans. Perhaps a famous king, but otherwise we know nothing about them. And your money will go there for a fight that we don't feel our own. And in this sense, I think we can judge them in a sense, but this is political reality. But whenever one feels the pressure on their own necks, like Ferdinand I, the brother of Charles V, the Emperor Charles V, when he inherits the inner Austrian lands, Styria, Carniola, Carinthia, he immediately tries to support the neighboring Croatian lands. He gives money, troops, whatever, to his brother-in-law, King Louis II. So, put it very briefly, those who help are those who feel the Ottoman menace very, very immediately. Otherwise, it remains an idea. Of course, we sympathize with the Hungarians, the Poles, whatever, but...
Thoughts and prayers.
That's right. Yeah. Lots of prayers for you. Yes.
All right, back to Ahmed. How would you describe Suleiman's original design for Hungary? Because it was very fashionable for the Ottomans to... Ottoman rule did not always mean an immediate incorporation or annexation of the newly conquered territories into the empire itself. One can think of either Serbia or much more famously Wallachia and Moldavia, which for centuries they retained their own rulers, but had to pay the annual tribute. They accepted the Sultan's suzerainty and were of course liable to Ottoman intervention from time to time, and the rulers might be appointed or confirmed by the Sultan, and members of their dynasties could be held at court as hostages, right in Istanbul, as hostages to guarantee good behavior. Was this vassal state set up his intention for Hungary as well?
Obviously, this is, again, still debated in academia. Tamas is one of the prominent voices in this debate as well, but I've recently had the pleasure of reading something that has not been published yet from my colleague Zahid Atçıl. You probably have heard of him from Boğaziçi University in Istanbul, but I'm of the opinion, I think the one that makes the most sense to me is that Hungary wasn't like the chief goal of the Ottomans in their project of conquest. So Sultan Süleyman